welcome back to another episode of the Dream Podcast with Jay again today. Welcome back, Jay.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I'm just going to give a little intro on what we're going to be talking about and expanding on today. As you guys have heard last time, and if you didn't hear the previous episode, I do invite you to check it out. We were talking about inner work or path work. Some of you might know it as shadow work as well. We were saying how it's important to consider that there's both this emotional aspect to it, but also a more logical or mechanical aspect. So it's important to pay attention to both when you're initiating yourself into this path work. See this journey, I guess, in a more integrated way. Right, Jay?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also an important invitation for you guys is the importance of shield integrity and upholding your space. So yeah, we're going to explore that a little more. We're going to give an intro. Well, Jay is going to give an intro into what he has been refining from the teachings that come from the Norse tradition, which we briefly touched on last time, and expand more on, for example, topics such as fate or orlog and destiny or word, W-Y-R-D. We're going to talk a little bit about fire codes as well, the importance of fire codes, inserts and cap-offs of what happens when you're connecting with your Rishi cognition and, limitations that you might have or you might encounter in your journey. And in general, that's what we will be speaking of, and maybe other things that come out. Anyway, thanks again for being here, Jay, and I'll let you get started.
I guess just to jump right in, something that can be used to really accelerate the understanding of all mechanics, and this connects into all the information on fire codes and how to see how all this manifests through the grid, through eternal mechanics or the distortions. Although there are different geomancies, all of this manifests through when you look at distorted vortex math and the eternal life math and sciences. All right, so a good way to start to understand exactly what is occurring in mechanics, I'll show this next, but when you hear about the scalar grid or the unified field, each node of the grid is manifesting through this form, which you could say is the living light seed. In Keylontics, it's called the Taran, but I've come to call it the Sadi code, kind of like Samadhi, but it's like the same meaning. And when you're talking about Samadhi, you're going into a deeper state of consciousness and meditation. So, but what this is at the node of every small point in the whole grid. So what's coming through, and you can see doubling, then it builds out into geometries. You can actually get the 12 lotus from this. You can get the Ryushi, which I'll also show. You can even build out there's certain phase lengths of this bottom one, which would be the polarities. And depending on that, when you start to double and rotate this, you get different geometries. You can build all of it out through this symbol alone. So it literally is the seed. And you can see when doubling it also, it's different angles than the seed of life that you see. So first, and I have the tonal A here. First, primal essence and force, eternal encryption. And then the tonals, which I can also show a deeper explanation of this and what's manifesting with these seed tonals. A blend point right here, which is actually creating a refraction lens, you could say, as the sound and light are manifesting. There's a lens that's manifested here. It's like a blend point, but neutral resonance, partiki, backflow into source, influx into manifest. So this is, in freedom teachings, it said is the two-way swinging door. How I understood it better was instead of a door, more so viewing it how when you're entering like an office building or a mall and they have those rotating doors like that. It's easier to understand like that because it's not just swinging back and forth. It's like a vortexing spiral.
Oh.
So at the center point, and there's a difference in mechanics when you're looking at the yin yang. They have the masculine as electric and the feminine as magnetic, but this is duality. Magnetism is the still point, the node, and the container, the womb space container. And magnetism controls the function of electric polarity. It's omnipresent. It's through everything. The magnetic still point, mother and child, standing wave core, womb space container. And then as this primal essence and force is manifesting through the magnetic still point, then you go into the cycles of polarity, which is both electric, masculine, feminine, electric discharge, centrifugal expansion, radiation, masculine. So there's a core intention here. And this is micro and personal to macro. And it's all one, but that'd be like personal, impersonal. What is viewing it from your perspective and then viewing it from a larger scale of many individuals within the one's perspectives. But it's slightly different in how you're viewing it. But if, let's say, you have your own personal intention, as the life force comes into your template, you have an intention from that magnetic still point. You're then going to cycle that intention. So as you're viewing it like that, there's a charge, an intentional charge here. And this is the mother and the child. So all is coming from the mother and that child, that it's a neutral resonance where all polarities are possible, but they're not present. It's like the pre-light and sound aspect. It's like before it manifests, where all is possible, but you're discharging that. It's a radiation transmitting force. And there's so many perspectives of this when you're looking at, for example, the Taurus field, and they say red shift and blue shift. That's also like the yin yang. Um, it's and that's more so when talking about the distorted Metatronic overlays and how they take a true sphere and through compaction, and the geomancies that are used to compact the true sphere, it doesn't have this connection to the true magnetic still point. So what's happening is it's actually creating two center points. So the center point would be in the center, but in a oblate sphere, it's oblating and these 2 points come out. So there's no true connection to the center point. And they show it also where there's only, at least in simpler mechanics that you watch people give presentations on this, there's only a flow like this where it goes out and then it comes in through the bottom. But in the true sphere and that true connection to 0 point, and I could pull up some graphs that could show this better. I have them in the highlight stories, the vortex math highlight stories also. But there'd be cones from each direction in the true sphere. And where there's a centrifugal discharge, there's another cone coming in that's centripetally pulling down. And when, for example, if you sent out a waveform, which would be conical, like a conical vortex, from you, that would be a clockwise discharging. It's going away from you. But from the person or whatever you're directing that to, if they're looking at it by looking at you, it'd be counterclockwise. It depends on perspective in mechanics and what angles and what perspective you're looking at. So it's both at the same time. For example, they say the left hand is a receiver and the right hand a transmitter. But depending if something's observing you, the clockwise, counterclockwise, they'd see it differently than from your viewpoint of what you're doing. But wherever there's a counterclockwise, there's a clockwise rotation at the same time in that vortex, and the same vice versa. So all of this is happening simultaneously. As soon as one part starts to happen, the other part simultaneously starts to happen. So there's an electric discharge, a centrifugal expansion, radiation, masculine, and there's an electric charge. So you're discharging a cycle of expansion, evolution, and then manifestation. And then there's an electrical charge to keep that cycle going. And that's centripetal contraction, generation, feminine. When you're studying all this, and I think it'd be important if you're studying Keylontics to also look into Walter Russell's work. But something to understand is both of those can help each other refine. Keylontics mechanics is a lot of information, but it's not as complete as people think. And the same with Walter Russell's. There's a lot of amazing information and graphs, but it's a little backwards when you look at it. So they say that centripetal is masculine and centrifugal is feminine. So just looking at that though, what is centrifugal? This is an outward radiation. The feminine, and when we start to look at this to say like, so how can you say that Walter's wrong? Or when you use Keylontics and Walter Russell's, you can kind of see how they help each other, but they all still need discernment and refinements. So when you're looking at the masculine, there is an aspect of the masculine energy that is bringing out an expression. And it's kind of hard to see it in how these archetypes have been distorted and in expression, like the divine masculine, divine feminine, and then these distorted perspectives of like the dark masculine and dark feminine and the shadow influence. But the feminine is bringing through a charge, the child in the womb space. There's a connection to the mother at the magnetic still point in the womb, and she's building a charge. It's the child is building in the womb, but she also has a masculine expression when she's giving birth. She's discharging that charge, that intention, that spirit coming through the womb. So, but she's still the mother figure through that, and the feminine. She doesn't. The feminine has a masculine principle in the archetypes, but when you start to get into roles, she holds that staff and that vertical alignment to that source intention as a womb holder. So this is that what they say in teachings is that like magnetic attraction and way of manifesting, more intuitive and emotional. But that's not actually, that is an aspect of magnetism. It's controlling the centripetal aspect, but that's actually centripetal electrics. It's that drawing in and building charge. And the masculine in that relation is taking that charge, that intention, which the masculine has his own feminine expression. But when you're looking at archetypal roles in an aligned way through eternal creation, the feminine is holding that connection to building a charge, and the masculine takes that co-creative intention and transmits it. He expands on it. He builds the structures of the line work out. So this is how you can start to, if you look at this manifestation template and how things come into manifest through each node, you can start to understand mechanics way simpler. And This is from simple to complex geometries. At every single node in the geomancy, this is occurring. From the spiritual core, the sati, living light seed, is the space which governs the entire eternal light sound body structure and multi-interdimensional domain. So this is just something to keep in mind when you hear of scalar standing wave unified field grid, or in KS, the Partiki grid. At each node of the Partiki, this geomancy is present in the cycling. This is what we perceive as motion, is these two right here. From the still point, all motion is the cyclical interchange from the still point to discharge and charge, and it's simultaneous. So what's next to view? Is there any part of that I need to explain better, or?
Well, to be honest, it's very technical even for me, but I felt, okay, this is what I felt listening to it, is it's very activating just listening to it. And it's like, I think with time we integrate this information, and it's like for me, it's like I get the general idea of what's happening, and it's yeah, you can definitely invite people to, or we're inviting you guys, if you're still here. If you're still here and you like this kind of work, and what you're hearing resonates at a soul level, you can look at it yourself as well. But Jay has done an amazing job at refining all this information throughout his years of extensive research and experiencing this on his own as well. So because I like sharing things that come from my experience, and what Jay is doing now is sharing things that he has experienced himself. And so the invitation is for you to also start experiencing things on your own, through your own path work. And it could look like Jay's, maybe similar, because we resonate with the same kind of information. So even though our paths look a little different, or well, very different, I should say, there are a lot of similarities, and things that we kind of, are drawn to, right? So it might look different for you guys, but the invitation is to explore, right? Explore your options and see what you resonate with the most. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point to share as I'm explaining all of this. This is just how I've been unfolding things and have come to see it. Everybody's going to have their own understanding and what they resonate with. It's important to see the full perspectives, and there's a lot more to share on all of this, to see the perspective that I'm trying to share, which I'd need graphs and to put it together better, to show it in progression and not kind of all over the place. There are absolutes in creation, but the only way that we can share what we have found to be true is to try and understand those absolutes. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not sharing it like this is the absolute, but some of it, as far as mechanics, is what I'm unfolding to be how eternal creation functions and operates. And that's from other people's work, but how I've come to piece it together and refine everything. Because from what I've found, there aren't any paradigms or bodies of work that are bringing things through fully in how it actually is. There's a lot of bits and pieces, and with freedom teachings and Keylontic mechanics, there's a lot of truth. But there are also a lot of incomplete aspects of the mechanics. So it goes to a certain point, and then it's kind of like some aspects have been shown in a general perspective and not showing complete forms, but it is more complete when you're viewing it. But it's kind of like where some things could have been shown more and expanded on, it's not. And then it goes into further more complexities, and it's like so it needs discernment, and I can show it, but it's up to one that's in resonance with studying this level of pathwork and mechanics to see it themselves. But it is important to gain insight from certain individuals that have pieced things together and go through it, but always use your own discernment. For example, Brit Higher Knowing on Instagram has a lot of insights to share with mechanics as well. It's so in depth in KS, and you can find so many different connection points. And like, for example, the Kabbalah and the 10 grid, and you look at Marco Rodin's Vortex Mathematics. If you start to use KS and that information to cross-reference all these things, you can see the distortion in geometry and what's being taught on Earth. It's pretty obvious. For those that are like back and forth, and I'll get into this next, that it's, oh, that's duality to say that there's eternal mechanics and the flower of life is not, like, you're just in a dual state and you don't understand it. You're like playing into this game. So when you're looking at a cubic wave field and you see what you see as like a square and then the diamond, and within that you can see the Cathara, and you rotate the Cathara so you see two, and it's like a diamond, not just the Cathara vertical. When you're viewing it from that perspective, as you start to rotate the cubic wave field, you can actually see what would be a Merkaba, or what they say is the seed of life. But it's not. It is that you find the shape in there, but what has happened, and there's other geometries that play into this, like the dodecahedron, and taking hexagonal structures and binding pentagonal structures onto them. And in 3D and higher dimensions, it builds out differently than just viewing it 2D. So, for example, if I have the same phasing ratios of the bottom spheres, two trinities, and you're just viewing the 2D aspect, and you have, and I say one of these is open source, Christic open source tri-wave phasing. The other one is a bi-wave closed loop triad, which there's both. There's a triad in both. And in KS, it kind of, when you look at people simply describe this and post it all over social medias, they say like it's the tri-wave and the bi-wave, and they show a 3 and a 2. But there's actually a trinity in both. But the thing is, one in the vortex math is 3, 6, 9, 12. The other one is 3, 6, 9. So you're taking a 12-base system and you're capping it off at the level of the tree of life grid into a 10 grid, and you're 9 modding it. So 9 becomes the capstone. And this is in the number counting too. So, all right, so let's say I have 2. You can't tell the difference if I'm just showing you 2 different 2D flat triads. If you're looking at it and I say one of those is a reversal and the other one is a full open source 12-base triad phasing, tell me which one is which. You can't from a 2D level. You have to start to understand these and a deeper complexity. So that's why people start seeing this and they immediately are like, what are you talking about? Like, that's duality. You don't get it. But there's way more to it to unfold what has happened. And it's pretty obvious when you start to see it, that there's an overlay on creation. And when you're looking at, for example, I can count through 1 through 9. And then once you get to 10, you simplify it, and it all goes back to 1 through 9. This is in 10-base counting. So, and this gets into all the vortex math. When you see people that really start putting this together in the magic square boxes that have the multiplication tables, and you can start to get geometries by connecting all the points of similar numbers, and then you start rotating that. This is the vortex math aspect, but it's not 3, 6, 9, 12. So you can do this with 10-base counting and add the 12 in, and you just don't simplify 10, 11, 12, but it's still going to have to go back to 1 through 9. But the thing is, and in the ancient times, they actually had 12 base, but there's something called dozeno, which is 12 based counting. They had to change the name and the symbol for 10, 11, 12, and there's always a 0 in the multiplication point table also. But this is a different level of counting, and it takes a while to understand all the levels of this system of counting, because it's slightly different, but when you understand it, it's pretty similar. It's just it's using 12 base counting. So you get to 12, 20 would actually be 24, 30 would actually be 36. So if you use this in it, in vortex math, you wouldn't be in that 1 through 9 loop anymore. As you start to simplify 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, that the 16 is 7, 32 simplified is 5. Now, if I use this in 10 base, I haven't fully done it yet with Dozeno and 12 base, so I can't show that fully, but you'd still get those numbers for a while. But with the 12 base simplifying, there'd be different simplifications in it. But for example, when you're looking at the doubling sequence, as you start to simplify those numbers from 1 all the way on, you start to get a simplification of 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. It continues and continues. That's the doubling sequence. But then you get to a certain point, it starts to go to like 3, 3, 3, 9, 9, 6. Like there's this code in creation. And
Do you have any evidence that you could show to kind of complement what you're saying?
yeah, I have more in the story highlights, but I picked this one out to show the difference in all of this. So right here, I have 3, 6, 9, 12, and notice the ratio difference. I'll show this later. Actually, if you look at the Cathara right here, this one node would be right here at Rishi Signet 1. And then you have 2, then you have 4, 8, 7, 5. These connect to that convergence symbol that I've shown also, which connects the Ryushi signets on the Cathara grid. This gets right into the core of vortex math. But and notice the ratio here also goes through at a 45-degree angle from the center, which would actually be Ryushi signet 6. It's not the vortex flux thrust is centered on the Ryushi signets and spheres, and the convergence, which is the word. This is the word geometry. This is at the core of the vortex flux thrust. So it all connects. But when you're looking at the 369 harness, notice it's not at a 45-degree angle. It's not connecting to the Ryushi signets in that convergence symbol. It's more elongated upwards. And here I have 36912, but this would again be at the signet 6, but it's not just at the bottom here. You'd rotate this around and it'd be that way, and then you'd rotate it 90, and it builds out in the geometry. This is just a simple depiction that you can look at the vortex, the 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, and how that sequence goes. So the doubling sequence belongs to the crystal spiral, the 12 grid tree of life. And I say that because when you look at this, they connect phi fib, which connects into this right here, with the doubling. But what they're seeing the doubling and the numbers, but they're not explaining how this isn't. And I have certain symbols here that they don't show when they show it, but it's not working with it. It's attached to the doubling. The doubling spiral, when you connect it in with Dozenel and 12 based, and the other components of this mechanics, it does contain the 3, 6, well, 9 and 12, but they say that this like completes it, because notice 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, these fire lines, they don't connect with the 3, the 6, or the 9. And they say this is like a masculine and feminine play in it when you start to study this. But it's a harness. So you have the doubling sequence that's harnessed from these inverted ratios on mechanics. So notice the difference in the ratios here of these wings, these flux wings. And at the center here is actually an implosive point. So it's like the snake eating the tail in an infinity knot. And at the top, this is a 9-modded capstone. It doesn't have the connection to 12. And this 3 and 6 are like the 5, 5, 5, 5. It's the bi-wave harness. And this is how I showed the Sadi code before. This is lodging the masculine and feminine in a distorted interchange where it doesn't have a connection to the source point, that magnetic 0 point. It's actually pulled down and it's harnessed. And this gets into the complex vortex math sequences and everything. So it's a triad, but the two down here are phase locked into biwaves. Transharmonic vortex flux wings through Ryushi signets. The true eternal vortex flux, Ryushi signet 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. The actual center being at Gruel signet 5. So signet 5 on the Cathara grid is in the Ryushi 12 signet 6. So there's an interfacing occurring. And the Gruels are on the vertical staff column. It's not the only aspect, it comes through the diagonals too, but this is where the life force is coming down through. Well, in a 3D, it's like the vortexing in the conical waveform, but through the 12 and the 1 signet, and they hit these signets in the center. But this is interfacing with Rishi signet 6 and signet 5 of the Cathara grid, where the vortex flux is constantly replenished through one of the Cathara Gruel spark points. The distorted vortex 369 harnesses the false navel, which is a harness blocking signet 5 Gruel and organic vortexing, and a false alignment of the Eum, the lower Dantian, you could say, density shield core, or known as the lower Dantian, which is 2 inches below the navel. This is one aspect of organic vortex math. So down here is showing a more complex depiction of the 369 harness. Notice this torus apple field making not only the yin yang, but it's like the snake eating the tail in a implosive closed loop system. Let me go to the next one. So, and this is all going to get into the word, destiny, fate. It all connects into this vortex mathematics. You can look at this and it be more than just 2D like this. It's every single direction. It's omnidirectional. There'd also be a spherical component of this where each cube is a sphere, but this is the cubic standing wave field grid. So this is the source field, the unified field that holographic reality is manifesting through in time matrices. So when we're looking at this, what I showed is the Sadi code. At each point, this level of it, there's a center point in smaller grids, would be that Sadi phasing and cyclicking. And from this point to this point, what you'd perceive as linear motion would actually be a flashing on and flashing off sequence of that Sadi at each point, cycling in the polarity and back into the source point, replenishing and coming back out, but there's oscillations, and movement is those oscillations, and it's really fast. It's not at a scalar and what you could call tachyon, or that eternal force and essence, that's the life force that's coming through and animating this grid. It's beyond space and time. So you're not just viewing linear motion. This is where you get into the component of the ether and the quantum field. However you want to say it. Some people are like, oh, quantum mechanics is bullshit. Particles don't exist. There's all types of people saying it's both, though. Particles do exist, but the actual mechanics of it is what is not perceived in its full complexity. But simplicity also. So everything is spiral, curved, and waveform. But technically, there is no like motion wave. It's all flashing on and flashing off. So movement isn't exactly how we perceive, but we do perceive motion and movement. It's something that we experience. It's vortexing, it's spiraling. But what I was saying is, so how I said it's flashing on, this flash line sequence from here to there, and you could view a waveform flashing on and off, oscillating. There's also a component of this grid that, let's say you are here at this point, and there's some type of communication with this point down here. You could, like, let's say there's somebody or there's something that you're transmitting to and you're viewing it off in the distance, but you can see it. You could transmit a waveform at it. That'd be like the linear aspect, but there's also an aspect of this grid that it can be here to there simultaneously. It's not only linear. There's a component of this grid where, for example, radionics, and you can use a radionics device and put somebody's picture on it, and you can transmit to them remotely a healing or whatever. It's through the scalar. It's through the unified field. There's an aspect of it that doesn't need to travel to get there. It's just like here to there simultaneous. It's communication through this unified tapestry of creation. There are better ways to explain this, and I've written better examples of that. But is it showing it zooming in?
Yes, I wanted to ask you something. So just for example, let's say even in those little areas, would there be more points? Like, is this like fractals? Like,
right. I'm gonna show that. This is just
yeah.
This is a smaller one of it.
Right.
And there's layers to the grid.
Yeah.
But notice on this one, so starting here, I go down, up. See the word, the convergence symbol?
Oh, yes. And
you
those
can
are,
see it in here. This is the tapestry. This is the convergence symbol that I was showing that connects with the word. It's literally in the fabric of creation, these symbols. This is where you can also plug every single rune into here. They're the flash line, fire lines. The runes are the fire codes of creation, literally. So when you are working with them and using them, you're speaking to the grid directly.
Yeah. I see a bunch of things appearing like simultaneously. Like when I'm looking at it, if I focus on a certain way, I see it.
So this is the smaller grid. I have it as a blue. That's one more layer added.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
There's one more layer added on.
Okay. Yeah. Definitely. Okay.
And then this is 3 layers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So this is like you could add infinite layers technically, like to this grid, right?
Yeah. So what we view as particles, like what they see on electron microscopes and particles, it gets even smaller than that, and that's where you get into the partiki, the even smaller particles that they say they haven't found, but they probably have with more advanced microscopes. But
yeah, I have a sister who's studying she's in more like physics and this kind of stuff and neuroscience. So, and she studied a little bit of like quantum physics and stuff, but of course, you know, more like mainstream. And this kind of stuff, you're not going to learn it in a mainstream educational system, right? So
Yeah.
they're going to tell you that the smallest particle is called, what do you like, some people call it source particle, but I guess in mainstream most people would call it just like a quantum, right? Is that what they call it, like in general?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
yeah. So how I was showing the two vortexing ratios, this would be the eternal grid. So what has happened is higher dimensional, but there was consciousness that, and this wasn't an ignorant fall to grace where they did some wrong choices, like they were ignorant. And after they did it, they realized that they weren't connected to the eternal spiral and grid anymore. So they had to resort to vampiring to get that sustenance to keep their grids from imploding. But they knew what they were doing. There were intelligent councils of Elohim that chose to defect from creation and cause an inversion in the grid and to create their own god worlds, and them being the demigods of these worlds. So when you look at this grid, if you look at it simply like that, and you look the Taran phasing like here, what they did was that they first had to attack some level of it. So what is explained in Keylontics is that from the 11th dimension, they targeted the 12th dimensional Stargate in Lyra, and they sent a pulse at it to fracture it. And the councils there had a choice. And if you're a dimension higher in 12D and you have the connection to the primal life force and all the awareness of the cycles from that level, so they would have seen it even before they even did it. They knew that they were coming with it. In the probabilities. So when they did it, when they tried to attack this 12th dimensional Stargate on a universal level, they had a choice to either bounce it back at them or just let them destroy it. And how I've come to see it is they bounced it back. And obviously there was destruction at that level in 12D. That work had to be done at that level to bring things back into like resonance and harmony, because there was this weaponized pulse that came through multidimensionally into that system to attack the Stargate. But they bounced it back. And what this then did was it created a rip where it came back to them and hit them. So immediately when this happens in creation, like let's say this is a universal level, you have the 12D here, and at a lower dimensional, it's can't really perceive it like this. It's way more geometrically complex and portaling in levels to creation. But let's say like you have the 11D1 like here, where they sent the pulse through the grids and they bounced it back. It created a tear at that level. And immediately when this happens, there's quarantines to stop any type of
Spreading.
Yeah. And so there's that, and who knows how long from our perspective that was that all this started to happen. And when you break down the grids and there's these inversions that occurred, not only from a mental and emotional level of what caused them to defect, how are they functioning, how did they formulate their societies and councils from this distorted perspective. So there was some type of rip in the time cycles, and they were quarantined. Basically, from a perspective of benevolent councils, quarantine them and put these cycles of bioregenesis going, that which would start basically immediately. But they need to start to rehabilitate and figure out what's going on with these families and lineages. But obviously, they didn't want that. They actually turned the quarantines. So this would downstep. So this happened at 11D. So there were also levels of this happening lower also. So it's really complex what has occurred in these fallen time matrices, and it's not just ours. But basically, they turned, and you look at the two vortexing math, that's at the core of it, like what's going on. And there's more complex geometries. But these reversal fallen geomancies have become like the main geomancies of the fallen grid. So you have this grid, but and it's this grid still is present, like it's present here. We can interact with it, we can connect in with source, even though we're in a fallen system and we have the 5 fib ratio in our vessels, that because it's harnessed from gestation and birth. But there's like both here. It's not fully fallen. This grid is still present. You can see it in nature also, but there's an overlay on it. So it's like filtering. Even unless you're in fully phantom, and even then they're just in a pocket. Basically, they're surrounded by the source field, but they've created this like pocket. So like at the higher levels, they know what they're doing, but when you get to the lower levels, and there might be beings that like understand this, but they don't fully get it. Like they might intellectually, these fallen beings intellectually understand it from a sense of hyper analyzation, like, but they have no emotion and spiritual connection. So like they think they're like extremely intelligent and just they're fueled by this ego intelligence, and they understand the fall from an intellectual standpoint, but they have no emotional connection to it, so they don't care. That's like fully fallen though.
I have one thing to maybe add. The people I interact with, I feel like sometimes are trying to, I guess, reach out and upward and trying to like enlighten themselves. And it seems like it's something unattainable that's higher up. But this is all that you're showing here is literally within.
We have our own personal scalar grid, which the geomancy manifests through this grid. All the fire lines and sequences of the geomancy. Even this is a geomancy. So there's an aspect of this that is in a way beyond this grid as well. In the cubic wave fields and the spherical ones, there's a internal creation and eternal creation. This is what's manifesting through external holographic realities and time matrices. It still would be the same mechanics, but it could formulate way different, even the same core geomancies, but when you get into different levels that even the fallen creation can't get into. All of this code is coming through 15-dimensional systems from internal creation, which manifests from eternal creation, which is literally eternal. And there, it is all eternal creation, but there's cycles also. But there's an aspect of creation when you start to go through the inner realms and halls, and you get into eternal creation, and it's almost incomprehensible what it's like. But so there is a reversal overlay on this grid, and they could even show it the same way from 2D, and you're like, it's the same thing, but it's when you look at the circle of fifths, which uses pentagrams, and it gets into the music scale too. It never has that 0-point connection. When you go through the octaves, it's not fully symmetrical, and it doesn't form a full 360. These are like, they're attached to it. That's why it doesn't form a full 360. And when you look at a circle made from phi and fib, it's not in equal portions either, like symmetrical doubling, multiplication, and like 12 base multiplication, and the doubling sequence, and how it scales. So it's basically, there's a grid. So the flower of life, it's like the nets. And there's more aspects to this, like pentagonal form, waveforms, and like buckyballs. If you've seen that, like a soccer ball, it's like a hexagram and pentagonal. It's like a harness and the dodecahedron. It's the pentagonal forms are taking the 3, 6, 9, 12 in the elemental command, and they're binding it. They're locking it up, phase locking the grid, binding it, and a siphon vortex. with an implosive center. So it has to keep siphoning on creation and the grid to get more life force, because it doesn't have an in alignment connection to the source field. It's like binded to it, and it's imposing its will on the elemental command instead of aligning with it.
Mm.
So that's a simple way to look at what's going on.
Okay. So would you say that this is like a representation of like I guess I don't know if to call it like the coding of our holographic projection? How would you define this grid? Like it like beside, you said
Well,
tapestry of creation,
well,
but
yeah.
where is
So
it? Like
this is like the main. You could say this would be like, in an organic sense, the mainframe, and the programs and codes are coming through each point in here, and each point is holding through that magnetic still point. It's holding all the information for the sound and light to manifest. The code, the programs, the geomancy, which steps down into holographic reality. So at this level, we perceive it way different than it would be if we had full access to this grid, which is present everywhere in all space. So it's still present, but it's like we're blocked from fully accessing it. And that's not just the inversions. There's also quarantines because the inversions are present. So when you get into word and destiny and fate, it's more complex to just say this is a prison planet. There's also quarantines from planetary all the way up to where the distortions are present, because of these ill intentions and networks and malevolence. It's like if elemental command was still fully active and running through the grids and all the stargates, and you have these beings that are knowledgeable of it, but they're not in alignment with it, they could do a lot of destruction. So there are quarantines that cap off elemental command, but what they've then done is they've weaponized the quarantines and they've created overlays. This is a major discernment in KS. Amenti is the underworld. It is not the stargates. So
oh yeah, because they
12
talk a lot about
spheres of Amenti, but 9 of which got infiltrated. And even when you look at Amenti, Ark of the Covenant, any type of covenant is a redemption contract. So these are halls at a mechanical level that were opened because there are quarantines. So if you have the eternal halls, the word, which is the halls of Rama'a, these are eternal halls that you can see at micro, like in this grid, all the way down to the vortexing of the convergence key symbol. But there's a macro version of this, which is literally eternal halls that run through the Cathara grids. And these are literal hallways, also like Romic hallways that connect certain levels of creation and Romic experience through hyperspace. Not only are there fallen halls that they're creating, so everything in phantom creation in these overlays and the hibernation zones are like mocking eternal creation. The code is just being resequenced, but it's mocking it. So you even have a form of ascension in false light, and like hallways and like libraries and records. It's the same. It's just it's its own realmic, like fallen aspect of mocking eternal creation.
would that be like the Akashic records?
Right there are false light records and halls, and then there's the actual records, Akashic.
Right.
The halls of Rama'a have an aspect of records to them. So covenants and like the Ark of the Covenant and these things that are taught in KS, and it's the Ark of the Covenant's also, it's all over in teachings and religion, but and there's a difference between the physical arc, the box and the rod and the staff, and these hallways. But these hallways are redemption hallways. It's unless they get fully overrun, which is why they exist, not to get overrun, but let's say they figure out how to hack these hallways that are set up as bridges to, so you go through, there's a fall, there's a quarantine, and then all of the manipulation that's occurred. As you do bioregenesis and you're in these systems that are dealing with this, you have access to these hallways, but you're not getting into the eternal halls because there's quarantines. You have to bridge your way. And only those that have the certain key codes can bridge their way through the gates. And this is where you get the whole concept of the fallen gatekeepers and the watchers. They're watching the best they can, the true gates, and blocking people. And then they're trying to re-navigate everybody into these feedback loops and keep it like a battery system. So this is the watchers. They're maintaining their prison complex, you could say. But the covenants and all of this, these hallways are like bridges. So they were set up by councils and elemental command, but they don't have full access to it. It bridges you to certain like waypoints. Like it's not really median creation, but it's kind of like a bridgeway before. It's kind of like filtering out infiltration. So you do your bioregenesis, you connect properly, and this is why there's so much manipulation. So we don't know what we're doing here, what to work with, where to go, how to navigate. This gets into the soul traps and at this level, and the white light tunnels, and oh, you have to go back because you didn't finish your karma, and you're greeted by whatever your religion is or your family members. And so, but let's say you access these halls, you get through to a certain level where you then go through further healing, and then you'd have access to the eternal halls. Or you're a key, a flame keeper, and you hold these codes and you just have access, but there's still security within that. So like, if it's not your true signature, even something mocking your signature, it can't get in to where you could on a spiritual level, your spirit traversing the hallways. But this is the game, what's going on. It's a grid warfare because they want more access so they can have more life force and hack more of creation. But yeah, this is into all the symbolism, into mythos, like all the wars, and you could say like Asgard and in the Norse, like Shambhala, like all these. This connects in with like Hollow and Inner Earth also, because when you look at multidimensional, there's gates like inward, and then there's gates in a different, like expanding outwards multidimensionally. But it's vast. It'd be more to show like just how external creation is. I have that in the story if anybody wants to look. It's a more in-depth view of what's going on from a, it's still simple because it gets really complex, but just to kind of see how things are working and with the mechanics of it. And there's still more, but from the scalar wave field grid perspective.
Nice.
All right, so we have the perspective of mechanics that's the standing wave grid, and then looking at here we have the 12 lotus, and this would be a geomancy that is manifesting as a flash line sequence through the grid. And that's basically what looking at the fire codes, what this is. It's a certain blueprint that's coming through this main scalar field grid that's manifesting as a template. What our templates manifest as, from one simple aspect when you're looking at this wouldn't be the complete structure, but looking at the 12-dimensional grid as one singular lotus alone, we have 12 fire codes. And one base code and 1 acceleration code equals 1 vector seed code. So you have 144 acceleration codes per strand, 144 base codes per strand. That would be this vector line right here for the first one. And it's hard to see on here. I have it in some of the codes, the same one, but more clearly in the vector as a product, and you can see it clearly. But what I put was a Cathara with all the crystal spirals, and I connected 12 of them in a vector line. So when you look at it, you have 12 Catharas, which would be 12 fire letters. And within each Cathara, you have 12 signets. So 12 times 12, it's 144. So within each of those signets, you'd have when you're looking at it at this perspective of it, of the spiraling, that would be each signet in each of those 12 Catharas, but each signet would have 1 base code, 1 acceleration code. So there you have the 144 and 144. And I put these in like vectors in these codes down. So it's basically showing the full 12 base template right here with all of the acceleration codes and the vector seed codes. But 1 fire code, which would be when you're looking at 1 rune, it'd be a fire code, equals 12 fire letters. So it's the runes are opening up into fire letter sequences, which are flashline sequences, and there's a language within all of this. So when we're looking at the distortions and what they're doing to the templates, what this is doing is it's not only blocking the organic flow.
Oh, and the screen stopped sharing.
You know,
So how is this actually communicating with our DNA through? What is it exactly that's, I guess, sending out the message or the signal to activate or what's it called, or assemble the strands? I don't know if that is easy to explain at all.
Like what is
is there an easy way to explain the mechanics, or is it like really complex?
Well, you could look at it like a organic, I don't want to say computer because it's not at all, but it's like an organic like mainframe that then brings through programs which manifest as geomancy, and they're form holding blueprints, and our spirit manifests through this mechanic. So what's communicating is the eternal force and essence animating the grid. And our spirit is coming forth as an expression of that. And the fire codes and letters is literally how the DNA manifests its code and the vortexing. It's living intelligence. And we are those identities of spirit coming forth with this. And that's what I was about to explain, but how this is being blocked. So a 12 strand being coming forth in a creation that's open source, you could be in 3D and still have access to this entire template. So totally that would be 12 fire codes, 144 fire letters, 1,728 vector seed codes, 1,728 base and acceleration codes. This would be full spectrum, but this is a base. You could have more, or now less. More in a sense of you're not going through the whole outstepping process. You're kind of like internal skipping over with more code. So it's like beings that come in with way more code than what would normally manifest. And there'd be specific reasons for this. And it's not about like messiahs or avatars that are like important. It's more so like overseers of certain elemental command and councils that need to manifest with more of their spirit's codex for certain things to occur in a system. And there's no like self-importance or hierarchy in this. It's very balanced, and because we're all connected to this. That's just that being's choice, and I don't know how to say it. It's not like permission, but it kind of like you can't just like jump in like that with a bunch of code. If you came into this level right now with the distortions fully 12 strand active as an infant, you'd probably like not survive in your template as an infant. There's You can't just jump around like that. There's many things that have to occur unless you're in the higher realms already, but even then you're not just jumping around like that. There's so many things that you just know, and like beings that, and it's not shape shifting like, because there's fallen shapeshifters too, but it's kind of like you transform into a different geometrical expression, and then you traverse levels. But anyways, for here, what's happened is like all these signets that I explained how you could view it in here, the base and acceleration codes, they start this distortion that I showed in the vortex math. It starts to block our natural sequencing of the fire codes, and it starts to scramble them, and then they repattern in a reversal way, or are filtered. So we don't have full expression of the full template. If we were in a space that was still eternal creation, you could even be at a 3D level and have full access. So you know of your other levels, you'd be connected with them. It's still you, but you'd have communication directly. You'd have all your abilities. You'd have access to elemental command. You'd see way more of creation and the code. But what's happening is, and this is how it all manifests, there's a harness on this template that's scrambling our code. And this also scrambles the true divine languages, which, yeah, some people could be bringing through sequences through their own template, which would connect directly with this, how they're speaking light languages. But not everybody you listen to saying light languages is, yeah, they're bringing through sounds, but you'd know if you heard a real light language, like you would feel it, or you'd have some type of adverse effect because it'd be like trying to flow through your blockage. And what I'm saying is, like, let's say somebody's cleared up their template and they're actually, either if it's just through toning, that's more so how I worked with light language, you could say, is toning, not just like freestyling, channeling light language. But it doesn't always feel great, even if it's something in alignment, because you could have blockages that you're starting to clear. But you do feel it, and it's powerful. It's the same thing with the runes. They can quickly bring up trauma, blockage, things to the surface as your template's starting to spark and activate your sequences, your fire line sequences. So you'll have your control code of each one, which could be symbolized in the runic fire codes as these adjugately paired ones, which you could call bind runes, but I don't call them that. They're just adjugately paired runes. So that'd be like the control code, and then there'd be a whole fire letter sequence of that specific fire code. And as you start to work with each fire code, not only is there lessons and things to heal, but there will then be activation. But there's so much in this sequence that has to be repatterned back into its original structure before you get the true activation. So when we're looking at the runes, so
I like that one a lot.
Viewing here, we have the 24, and I've refined the tonals that they give, but and they have more tonals. So for example, fehu, this first one, I have fehahu.
Mm.
Uruj, ur or uruz with a Z. I have uruj, like a JH, like maji, that j sound. Or ansus, anasuja.
Mm.
I added I just refined them and put more seed tonals in the pronunciation of them. But you have
So do you think, sorry, just one question about the because it sounds a lot like Anuhazi, but what is up with Anuhazi anyways? Is it like people say the first ever spoken language, or what do you think?
that's what's said, and honestly we can't know for sure, even if you feel a resonance with it. Like, what was the original fire code language, Blu-ray fire code language in this time matrix, and what did it sound like? And it is everything that she shared correct? And a lot of her tonals, actually, I've refined some of them, like amor, aya, or like the amor, and it kind of sounds like amor, like love
Mm-hmm.
in some
Mm-hmm.
languages. And a lot of her stuff is connected to Greek tonals and Hebrew, and
Right.
that's her filters in it. But there are seed tonals in it, and you can see seed tonals. I'll show this briefly before the end of, also. But
Oh, wow.
seed tonals in Sanskrit, and that's also what the Elder Futhark is using, is a seed code, fire code language.
Okay, so what you're saying is that they all contain that C code in one way or another, but people who have been bringing them forth have used their own filters, which there can be
Yeah,
distortions.
and tweaking things, and
Yeah.
this is why you can see um, fallen deities or languages, or like Mudwaneter, the one in Kemet that was brought forth by Dehuti and the Thothians.
Mm.
It's They're similar seed tonals, but they just rearrange the fire letter sequence differently. So there's different tonals all over. This is how it all connects, though. If you and the closer you are to the original one, and that could be still distorted if you're close, and you're using a lot of these tonals, it still depends on your intention. So you could sing whatever song you want and still be ill intention and use these tonals improperly. It's the
Right.
same thing with somebody could sit and use one of these tonals and the fire code, but with an intention to try and bind somebody. It's the
Yeah.
same thing. It's like, but they're gonna mess themselves up even faster if you're doing that. So with every cause, there's an effect. But these fallen networks can still. That's why you still see it in many of their names. And how could that be called that, but it has a divine meaning? You could see this in Sanskrit. So when you have to find the meanings that have been passed down from the rishis, and like the rishis from the Himalayas and in India, not rishi at the higher level, you have to look up the Sanskrit mantra tonals meanings. Or else, if you start looking up the seed tonals, you're going to find the mundane, after years of being messed with and broken down. There's all types of meanings in tonals and speech when you look at Sanskrit. So if you look at the mantra definition of a seed tonal, it's going to be way different than if you go to a normal Sanskrit dictionary online and you see. You can also find complete contradictions. There will be like this dark, like, overlay on the definition to something that's not. Like, for example, sa, that tonal with the S, meaning wisdom. It's that sound sa is bringing forth an aspect of it, wisdom. And this is why you have like serpent and the wise snake. They're just, do you see how they do it? There is truth in it, but then they kind of just put their overlays on it, and they use these codes, these sound waves, and it's intelligent. This gets into how they've overlaid our language and all the double speak and the etymology and the gematria. It's so like, it's a control system. They've like cornered us in. So we're using English right now, but the intention still gets across. But there's a lot more powerful ways to speak if we knew them and had connection to it.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. So did you make an image? Sorry, did you create this symbol in the middle, I'm assuming?
Yeah. So this is 8 spheres, 8 lotuses on the outside one, and then a 24 lotus with 24 lotuses within it. Then I have another 24 one. And within this one, you have in one sphere, it might be 48 or 24. I'm not sure with this one. I have other codes that are more clear than this one. This was what I did years ago when I was saying I made more complex codes, and this was all on my phone. I didn't even have Photoshop at the time. So I was making this on a Photoshop app on my phone.
Wow.
But within this one, there's a 48 sphere lotus, and within that is 8 48 sphere lotuses.
Very similar to this one you made. By the way,
Yeah,
guys, this is
it's actually the same.
Okay, there we go. That's why I like it so much. Cool. Okay.
But now going to the adjectively paired. Oh, here's another one. No. Let's look at this one. It's kind of the same thing, but I have the lotus brought up to the front now to show it. And within here is actually Ryushi vortexing. But yeah, when you look at runes with the more Norse and then Viking style brought into it, you'll see either the Helm of Awe or Thor's hammer symbolism, Mjolnir. And they'll use those more simpler designs, which in symbol, it's basically showing the same thing. I don't know if you can see where I have the mouse right now.
Yeah.
But down here in this one showing Cathara vortexes. If you look at the Mjolnir or the Tibetan, it's all over, but the Vajra, if you know that symbol.
That sounds familiar, but yeah, I see what you mean.
That's basically this. It's showing the cross section of the Cathara vortexing. It's like it's mechanics, and it's in the symbolism too. Lightning, symbols of lightning and life force, and you have to have virtue to access the life force. You can only, or in the mythos, what they were teaching, if you have the worthiness of Thor, you can hold his hammer. What is Mjolnir? It's this access and the power of the force through that cross point, through the center point, and you're accessing the life force, the lightning, and you can either use that to protect, or in distorted terms, destroy, or create. So what they've done though in all this symbolism is they've taken mechanical symbols of power and they've turned them into weapons, like Shiva's trident, and these are destroyer gods that putting their will over elemental command can use them to destroy. And that's either cataclysmic events and resets, or and then they restart it, order out of chaos, then they restart the cycles, and it's still there, but there's veils. Those aren't the real creator gods. And
yeah, so there's the importance of learning how to shield, shield integrity, and what we were talking about in the intro.
that's basically what working with the fire codes is also. So working with your pillar, bring this one up.
So this is going to be like an intro to maybe some mechanics and techniques that people can kind of start looking into, right?
Yeah, and I have all this in the stories on the page too, but
it's really nice to have you talk about it live. It makes more sense, because sometimes we look at the stories and there's definitely a lot of information, but it's nice to hear you expand on it.
Right. So all of the geomancy, see in an example, just scroll through my page and you can see all types of eternal geometries. Working with what you could call the pillar of power, or in freedom teachings, the Maharic pillar or the 12D pillar, and that'd be 4 feet in each direction. You could view your personal circle or the circle of the Magi, the circle of the Magi, 4 feet in each direction and flat radially around you. And what they teach in occults is that's where they use the sword. And the Magi holds, or the Magi holds the sword. And with frequency, depends like what you're doing. If you're evoking, not invoking. And in Hermeticism, Kabbalah, all of that, they use pentagrams to seal in a circle. And they also invoke, not evoke, they invoke entities to guard the points on their circles. So, but with evoking the circle of the Magi or your pillar of power, not only would you do, and I don't do it exactly like is taught, but a 12D shielding, the threefold flame. A lot of people say don't do those and work with the new works plasmas. But if you're not working with these core ones in the system that we're in, and yeah, we're connecting with blends and internal creation, but you can bring in the heliotalics, and technically all this is plasma also. Plasma is fire and air combined.
Right. Can you make it bigger?
Is that better?
Yeah, and maybe scroll down a tiny bit. Yeah, perfect. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so just this level of the templates, not showing the chakras or the signets or anything. You'd have your resonant core, density 2 core / azure, still point, center, middle dantian, thymus gland. So notice the middle dantian isn't at the heart chakra like they say in certain teachings. It's at the thymus gland. That's where the center point is. But in many teachings, some do still say it's 2 inches below for the lower dantian, but they'll say it's at the navel and then the heart and then the pineal gland. But if you measure on you also, it should be an equal distance, like from here to here, and you can map things out. And obviously our bodies are different sizes, but and it's not like exact always, but the center point at the thymus gland. And on a physical level, there actually is a lot of regulation that occurs with the thymus gland. And it'll still connect in with the heart. And but the center here, and this would be the resonant core, and notice also density 2. So when you're looking at the teachings, that's dimensions 4, 5, and 6. But there's a connection point in there. And you can see that, for example, here, like the azure is there, but this would be like the density 2 platform. So this is like the center point, but there's an interface going on between all these density levels in density 2. More still that I need to unfold so I can explain it properly, but that actually isn't explained in the teachings. Like what is this connection point between the azure and density 2 in context to this level of our template? So, and I have the threefold flame on this vertical channel, cycling, which would be cycling between these 2 points, and not literally at the earth core, but an earth core interface chakra. So you have your earth star chakra, the 12D platform. and then your own personal earth core interface, which you would draw up aqua from and fill it in here, fill it in here, fill it in here, fill it in here. And you can even bring Keylontic up and the top capstone chakra, the Crystar 14th chakra platform. You do the same thing. But basically, you don't need to use a sword like they teach in the deeper teachings of evoking your pillar of power, but basically a simple way to describe this of one way you can work with it stops screen sharing, but one way you can work with the runes, that template, the Maharic pillar technique, and again, I've refined it. But let's say you're running the Maharic frequency, the threefold cycling, heliotalics, whatever spectrum you're working with out of those, the threefold being the primal life force that's manifesting, the aqua, the pale gold, the magenta. And you can see this all over. For example, in biogeometry, they actually teach that they call it the BG3. But what they teach is ultraviolet, gold, and this negative green perspective, which basically they're talking about scalar, but they say visually it's like a gray color and it's on the other spectrum of green. And this is what you see when the negative green is in alignment, in resonance. For example, they say in pyramids that there wouldn't be stagnation. The life force in the environment, the land, or the being would be in resonance. And when the BG3 negative green is out of alignment and stagnant, that's where you have sickness. Just as an example of other teachings where they have this three aspect of this like higher spectrum. But basically the life force, aqua, gold, magenta, which all those together would actually create a light emerald color. But bringing this life force into the system, and let's say you're sitting down and you basically visualize on your base platform, 4 feet in each direction at each signet point, the rune. And as I'll show an example of this pathwork and what's behind each symbol, there's a lot of power behind this. It's not just like, you don't even necessarily need to have the full comprehension when you're working with them. If your intention is pure and you're using this symbol, that the power of that and divine law is going to be encrypting your space. But you use your mind and the frequency, and you could use a staff. You don't need to use a sword, and you literally point with it to the area where you're visualizing it. And you go all the way around toning, and or just in your mind sitting down, and you're basically encrypting your pillar and your circle and your sphere of power. And this is important to do anytime you're opening up any type of space for any type of ritual or grid work or anything like that. You can even evoke a circle around your house, your room. But there's a way to do this also. And it depends what mechanics you're working with. But let's say you want to open up the space, encrypt it in your own container, and contrast, you could call this hermetically sealing the space, but it's not hermeticism. But and you're not calling anything in unless you're calling in like your spiritual family, your rishi, true, like what you could say, ascended masters, yanas, whatever you want to say, but you never call them into your circle. And it's different. You're not calling entities and beings into like contract with or come. You always work with it through your rishi, and you can come for. There's so many tricksters. That's why it's important to just source presence, your source creator connection through your center point and evoking your circle. And if let's say you're working with elemental command in nature, communicating with the trees or whatever, it's important to create that encrypted space. And you can do this all through technique and pillars and frequency, but working with the fire codes, it makes it a stronger integrity. So, and behind each one it's not only just mechanics and code, it's living, and there's virtue, and there's specific elements and archetypes of each fire code. So it's really powerful. And it's personal to you also. So your own fire codes that you're encrypting your space with. But you can do this, for example, if you're doing some type of fire ceremony. You open up a circle clockwise, toning each one around the fire. You light the fire, you put your intentions in it, whatever you're doing. And then at the end of it, you counterclockwise tone. You close the circle out. So there's a lot going on in all of this. And how I've pieced it together, this would be the adjectively paired rune 12 fire code. Basically, what this is doing is when you combined runes together, you're combining the qualities of that symbol and the powers within it. So what this is basically doing, taking a 24 fire code circle and adjectively pairing, like the two vectors that line up, the 1 and the 13, the 2 and the 14, so forth, combining them, bringing it down into a simplified grid, the 12 grid. And there's a certain way that I aligned each one and certain geometries that they build out to. But you're creating a path of acceleration. So when you look at the 24 runes, they have them separated into 3 parts. And this is where it gets kind of interesting. The first section, I'd have to look it up because I don't study this, but I've looked at it and I see how it could connect with like even density level, like 4 density levels, but they have it in 3, 8 runes and 3 sections. The top line represents Freya's Ayet. So the first section of that 24 would be Freya is, in their mythos, Odin's consort. So this would be like the divine mother and father, like a twin pair. But there's a lot of, when you look at the mythos, and a lot of people say certain things like connecting the Aesir to like Syrians, but these are, from my perspective, fallen lineages. When you look at the stories in here, they're not always so benevolent. There's a lot of tricks going on, even not even just with Loki and the trickster Thoth, and which is connected to like Thoth, you could say, Loki. So already there with there's meanings behind all this though. And Freya's Ayet, you're working with putting together the physical and life management skills, surviving the hardships of living here and the trials that we have to go through, and having the tools on an energetic, spiritual, and symbological connection, like with the runes, and the practices and teachings to progress through those cycles, getting your foundation set, basically. But it's interesting how they have this set up. So you have Freya's Ayet, then you have Heimdall's Ayet, and then you have Tyr's Ayet. These are 3 different beings in it, but when you go, so as you're working with the fire codes, like I said, it's going to bring up all types of things in your template. All of your stuff's going to come to the surface that you need to work with. And the runes are kind of like how to accelerate that and get directly to it, how to work with it. But not only that, you have the teaching behind it, and it's like a sequence of pathwork. So you're not just like, there's a structure. So when they get into the second section of this, the runes bring up like all of this, what seems like destruction, but then there comes these still point periods and gestation, and the runes provide stability so you can recuperate. And but it's kind of like the hero's journey, if you've seen that. You're called to action, and then you go through the cycle, and then there's a crisis, and then there's like the antagonist, the like enemy, and the battle, and then you go through, and it's like but it's a cycle, and it's like archetypes. There's archetypes behind these. So I'll get into this next. I'll show the 3, 6, 9, 12 of the pathwork of this.
So are you saying like this is comparable to the hero's journey, but not like that, because the hero's journey is more like keeping you in the loop, right?
The hero's journey is an archetype of the hero. So each archetype is going to have certain experiences. And if you align with just one archetype, you're going to connect with that archetypal experience. And there could be distorted aspects to that. There could be true aspects to that. But it's kind of like a vehicle almost. Like if somebody's born in this life in any of the astrological Aquarius, Capricorn, so on, and you're like, I am this is what I am. That's an archetype. You're going to manifest things like that, a personality like that. It's like a vehicle, it's a container, but we're all of the archetypes. And those are also just filters and screens in the hologram that we're manifesting through. Right. So just because we're born in one specific node of the time cycles in this life, we could have been could have been completely different in another lifetime.
Right. And then also we have other aspects of ourselves that are living other lifetimes or in other timelines, I guess, or in other parallel realities that are doing something completely different, right? So to limit ourselves to what we're doing in this 3D experience, yeah, it's limiting.
An example of how in depth this gets, and this is just a generalization, even when you go through this, there's a personal aspect, like I was saying, the personal and impersonal, or like subjective and absolute. There are things about the runes that they're the fire codes of creation. So it's not just like personal, individual to us or a tribe or anything. It's line work, and you could have certain symbols that beings and tribes have aligned as fire codes, but these get right to it, and they build out directly into the word or the convergence geometry, which you see in the cubic wave field. And that convergence symbol in a 3D sense, if you go into 4D, this would be like the hypercube. That doesn't mean those are the eternal halls. There's levels to this, and it's not just a 4D tesseract hypercube. But that's what it's building out to. It's like how the cubes connect multi-dimensionally and cluster and start vortexing through them. But if you're looking at a 2D, it's like the convergence that you see on the Cathara. But the runes are actually multi-dimensional. So like if you're looking at the corner of a cube here, and it goes like in that plane and that plane, and there's the top, this is actually, it's showing the fire lines of a multi-dimensional cube. The lines could be on different parts of the cube, but when you turn the angle in a certain way, you get the symbol like this. So the third one, this is after the first and the second cycles. So the first dealing with resources and tools, and on the accelerated path of combining them. Also developing your psychic ability as a foundation, how to navigate. But obviously somebody waking up out of things isn't just going to activate psychic abilities, or they could already have them. We all are psychic, you could say, but it's how have you fine-tuned it. And then the second one, dealing with your power and life force, the Gruul force, and Uruj, and the ancient symbolism was the aurochs, or the bull. It's like and they use the bull to like the ox, kind of, not like all the distorted symbolism of it, but the ox, like powerful, and they would what do you call it when you're creating pathways for farming on your land? It's kind of like it steers forward with the intention, but the symbolism behind that you're connecting with the magnetism and the life force coming in, and you're inducting it. And then you come to this next stage with the 3, dealing with biofield awareness, buffer, shield, spiritual and physical, love, magic, and combining these 2 together with elements, fire and air.
I like how magic is written with a J. That's different.
Yeah. As far as what they are called through Elder Futhark, Torisage, and connected with Algis. But this is how I find them: Thore, Risaja, Eloha, and G. This was before I did some further refinements. But cosmic force and order, and defense of cosmic law and ordinance, polarity synthesis of dual biwave into triwave, bring potential into a strong focus force, bring 2 extremes of kinetic energy into a pattern of refined action, regeneration and fertilization, turning within and dealing with regenerating your energy and fertilizing. So like seeding your intentions from as you're regenerating, and as you're stepping into this new cycle. It's the 3rd one in this cycle that's starting, because you can look at this from personal, planetary, solar, so forth, the runes and cycles, and runes even align planetary and with the spirals of each plane. But dispel the power of sleep in Trinity arc. And if you notice, like this aspect of it, if you combined 4 of these together, like vertical and horizontal, they would form like the Ryushi and the inner diamond right here.
What do you mean by dispel the power of sleep? Sorry, that kind of caught my attention for some.
Well, a lot of us have been either from any level of it, just what's manifest in the grids and the cap offs and overlays, or some smaller spell or whatever, because the runes can be used to navigate your self-initiation, but they can also be used to, like here, defense of cosmic law and ordinance, your ordinance. You evoke the rune circle, and that's your spiritual ordinance and your shield integrity, because this is connecting with your template. This is like your signature that you're evoking, being like, I'm standing here. This is my stance. This is my pillar, my circle. And like you're standing in your fire codes, your template, you're taking your stand and everything that's involved with it. But to dispel the power of sleep, so any veil of sleep and cap offs on this, it's kind of like casting that out and off of you.
Okay.
Pathwork. So this is just kind of a brief example behind this fire code and symbol, but awaken the will of action. So pathwork wise, meaning like what you need to do to move through this cycle. And that's going to look different for everybody. You're going to have different experiences, different people involved, different outcomes. It depends what you're working with and what your purpose is and your intentions. And awaken the will of action, banish and override interference, preparedness to integrate multidimensional consciousness, knowledge of law of polarity and tri-wave phasing mechanics. So starting to learn things. Defense against black magic, taking your victory stance. So learning exactly what that means also. Trinity arc, pillar activate, and anchor line. A lot of these it's just general and not all the details. Obviously, you need to have some context of all these words and examples of things, but above, below, within, without, understanding what exactly that is, following the way, your self-initiation, the path before you, your journey, liberation and protective space to cleanse and accelerate. So what we're saying, spiritual integrity in your container, learning what that is. A unified ideological complex and secrets within the rise in power, taking flight and spreading wings, etheric flux, cognition, spirit-human connection, biofield awareness, and components of awareness taken into greater depth, protection and clearing container, life expression, path through the branches and roots of the eternal tree, connection to Rishi and higher self eternal spirit identity, alchemical themes, focus, and synthesis. So, and within, as you go through, again, this is just taking an overall view of it, but everybody's going to have their own experience, their own knowledge and wisdom will awaken and unfold what they know everything to be about. But just kind of taking a perspective of absolutes and trying to explain them in a way that we can understand how all this path work works. But jumping ahead to the sixth one, controlled energy, ability, transformation, purification, spark regeneration, will to generate, overcome sexual lust, creativity. You could say they're less, like looking at elemental command, you could say the 3, 6, 9, 12 is air, water, earth, fire, but I put in more components because of combining these symbols together. Further surrender, so meaning you're surrendering to stop resisting your pathwork and what you need to do, not to anything or one. Acquiring the torch within the well of life force. You're lighting your way forward, moving deeper into path and cultivating purification, transformation of psychic and psychosomatic complex, new and regeneration of mind and forms, strength and ability in all realms, creative, inspirational, brings higher synthesis of polarization and unity for higher engagement, regeneration through healing and sacred sexuality, birth and rebirth of cycles, blessings, nurturing peace, stability, wisdom, pathwork, refinement of virtues, and action within, starting to build momentum and clear any pullback into lesser forms, the power of the psyche in accordance with divine will and natural law, opposites transfused, and a unification and bringing together in an orderly fashion, cultivating sacred marriage and manifestation, cloisters healing and coming together into kinship and synocratic order, integration of knowledge and wisdom of divine mother force and the centripetal contraction into generation, build charge in Manu Ire container center point, then into radiation flux thrust, developing and understanding that container of all becoming and being into a knowing, arising and becoming, passing away into just be, the flow state. All is unique and upheld in the mother's womb space container through the universal pattern which holds the seed codes which start to express and expand, learn and become, our breath and be, uphold yet let go and surrender, allowing the in-breath to bring you to the center where you can rebirth and prepare, cultivate through the still point, resonant, eternal creatrix sphere, scalar magnetic influx, outward thrust, which with a pause and rejuvenation from eternal first essence of all that is, flash on, flash off, triway phasing, alchemical themes, distillation, and purity. So that last part was just explaining, starting to get into the flow of understanding and being in that center point of the mechanics and cycles and how energy moves, and breaking free from trauma loops and the shadow, like the clear any pullback into lesser forms. So yeah, this is getting later in the cycles, and you're really starting to put things together and learn how to come together, and the healing within that. Starting to cultivate sacred marriage and manifestation. So within, or if it manifests without, but in context to within you. Synocratic order. So meaning how beings come together as the wisdom councils did, and stewards and guardians of earth, creation, elemental command, and how these councils function not as a hierarchy, but coming together in unity, to put it simply. And this is all, like I've been saying, an alchemical process also. Moving to the 9th, connection of the pillars. Synthesis, potential, formality, protection, banishment, completion, evolution. So some aspect of this overall cycle, there's completions, you're forming new, there's an evolution, you're banishing the old, there's protection in this, you're connecting your pillar of power, or if that's outward with others, there's syntheses occurring, and there's a new potential coming forth. Elements, earth and water, basic life energy, foundation stone, crystal, formality. So the foundation stone element, connecting with destiny, also deep aquifers and watery rites of passage, ongoing evolution, completeness leading to greater power. Numinous experience and evolution within framework while protected in divine law. Born of dynamic force of aether and elemental command blending, union of opposites, eternal cosmic harmony. Bringing all potential into power stance focus, the hailstone. You're calling it in, you're evoking what you need and what you're calling forth divine order, law, destiny, identity, power, and tri-wave neutral flow state. Experiencing acceleration while in the observer still point awareness, bringing cycles into refinement and completion, and utilizing framework and foundation to accelerate. Eternal crystal river engagement. This is pretty general in her teachings. When I say crystal river, I'm talking about elemental command specifically, not some lofty MCEO Guardian Alliance magical crystal river that's saving you. Crystal are sound tones, seed tonals of creation. That's the crystal. Each one is a seed tonal. River, that's water. An aspect of elemental command is like a river, the time cycles, the rivers. There's something, it's not so mysterious. Like what is that? It's an aspect of elemental command, and that's just a way of saying an aspect of it. You could say the crystal stone, crystal fire. Understanding the layers of the law of one through life and love, bringing complete balance of power, mystical and numinous experience cultivated into wisdom, evolution becoming base operation. In the last slide, we talked about people asking, like, do I need to do this every day? At this point in your pathwork, you're realizing this is constant. It's not like, how much do I have to do this to finish this and be my avatar? You're realizing that it's ever present, it's constant, it doesn't stop, you're always in it. Evolution is becoming your base operation. You have the foundation, you know what to do. Now you're just experiencing it and going through the process. Understanding role placement in the law and governance of causality. Eternal crystal river engaged through a strong foundation in natural law and identity, where the primal waters that contain latent amorphous potential of life, which must be brought into creation and manifested through animation of elemental command and divine fire before it can be actualized. You're starting to work with the elemental command. Um, there's power behind your manifestation. And you're realizing the levels to this, animating your manifestation. It's no longer just law of attraction. You're realizing all the components and how to animate things with elements and the divine fire and how you have to actualize it. And then you'll see your manifestation taking form. It's no longer some aloof process of sending out my thoughts that are positive and they're going to come back to me at some point. And as long as I just state these affirmations, it'll manifest and I'll experience that. It's way more involved and engaged with your purpose and your destiny and your foundation and what you've come here to do. Things like that, like, oh, I want to manifest money so I can travel or so I can do this. I want to meet this person. I want to manifest my twin flame. It's these type of things are, I wouldn't say this, it's almost like petty to you at this point. You're like, I see the bigger picture. When it comes, it comes. I'm in tune. I'm in the flow. I'm working with elemental command. I know that I'm aligning my destiny arc. Unification and wound healing. So there's always still more things to heal and cultivate, and bring together.
Yeah, what you said just now about the whole twin flame thing and all is so relevant. You see that I've seen it a lot in I guess in general in the spiritual communities, right? And so there's a lot of distractions, right? And I guess we'll touch a little bit more on this. I'll let you do you're gonna do number 12, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we can talk a little bit about inserts and kapos. So yeah, keep going.
So at this point, you're completing a round, the round table. At this point, and you could jump all over, but if you're going through the process, you're also going to be at a certain fire code of embodiment, which would connect in with the strands and the fire letters. And this would be how many strands you're embodying. So if you look at this realm we're in right now, what are we capped off in? 3D, three strands, or the double helix. It's not even fully 3 strands seen. What is everybody stuck in here? The physical, survival, resources. That's what the first runes work with, your life force and your resources and tools. So you can see how it's connected. This is what everybody's stuck in, and games within this, and money and physical material things. And they're stuck there. They're phase locked in the first 3 strands. And that's where the distortions come into play in this and locking us up, and the veils, the lower astral veils, and the levels of the veils, and how some people don't get through certain veils if they break through some, but some keep progressing, and you break down each layer of the 9 veils of the lower astral, and you start to accelerate how you can perceive in the nets. But at this point, you're self-initiating yourself. You're completing your first cycle of embodiment. And this doesn't mean you're 12th strand activated. This would mean, though, you do have some level of fire letter awareness. You're pulling through from 12D. You're starting to become more aware and embodied in everything, but you're not an embodied 12 strand activated avatar. And cyclical development, peace, harmony, enlightenment, sense cognition, realization of cycles, wisdom management, new concepts and integration, preparing for new cycles and completions of old. Embodies cyclical patterns of the universe expressed in the formula of being and becoming, releasing into a new arising. Basic core capstone pattern working through the runes and cyclical nature, just explaining what symbol this could make if you build it out. And it kind of looks like what you could say is what they call a swastika, but it's just showing a vortex spiral. the Jera or Jaya Hura, I have it as. That's these two right here. And when you rotate this, that forms a vortex spiral in the center, and it shows like the Ryushi cross. Mystery of the 12-fold cycle of yearly solar cycle. Within is the guiding force, the cyclical path, and the archetypal sun itself. Honor, right lawful nature, order in the continuum, natural law. If the sowing is done correctly, luck. There's actually a word that they have in Norse teachings. Starts with an H. I can't think of it right now, but there's an actual energy behind luck that they believed in, and it's like a presence. So not luck in the sense of like wishful thinking, but you're learning that there is a living essence to what you could say is this like luck. I wouldn't say it's an entity exactly, but there is like an energy to luck and cause and effect. There's more going on. It's not so mechanical. Like I have a cause, there's an effect. That's like mechanical thinking. There's an actual living essence to everything. And as you start to build this up around yourself, there's power in these essences. And this connects in with virtue also, but attuned in resonance. So when you're in resonance with the true path and the life force, atonement, you're becoming at one-ment. You're becoming in at one-ment with eternal creation. So you're atoning yourself. The fruit shall be great. This symbol holds in quads, monad, eternal core essence, encryption and blueprint of cloister. This is 12, the capstone code. 12D, the capstone code. A certain level of your blueprint that holds your cloister, your core family's like signature, you could say. But also holds all encryptions through lines and context, your genetic codes. This first cycle through, you're working with mostly healing your blood codes. This is this density level, your genetic ancestry, and all the pathwork within that. It could be vast. It depends what your ancestors have done in their ore log, which connects in with yours. And now depends who you birthed in with. What genetic blood code family have you birthed in with? What have they done in the past? Have they made really wrong decisions? What type of healing is involved in that? What traumas are in that? So it's not even necessarily directly your own trauma at this level and how we've been recycling. We do know them. We've had some type of connection most often. We don't just randomly incarnate, kind of at some level choose it, but there could be all types of things that could happen, depending on who marries what and what lines are crossed. And so it's vast, and the blood codes are that, and learning that and starting to become aware of this on a higher level and picking up things that you're dealing with, not even necessarily from a more in-depth level. You could be getting visions, intuition, seeing connection points from your ancestors, even communication, releasing discarnates that could be connected to people from your ancestry on your living ancestry or lodged in the grid. There's so much involved in blood codes alone of healing, which a lot of us have come here to do. A lot of beings get stuck in the grids in these lower astral realms, and a lot of us are here to help them navigate out. And that's also in the blood code healing. Acquiring the fruits of efforts and pathwork towards vision and goal, bringing forth the new and swift flight of the eternal sun, realizations and cognition of time matrix and cycles in the multiverse, planetary, solar, galactic, could say metagalactic. You don't have to use the word meta in this context. It just means more than. So but you could say multi-galactic, whatever word you want to use. Universal, realizing the mystery of omnipresence, Partiki Trinity, scalar magnetic standing wave field. So the awareness of this and why it's put here. Upholding Maji presence in a safe and secure container, the holy boundary and pillar of power, defending against unholy intruders, leading into the center point, and D13 diamond door. So just that D13 magnetic point at the center of this 12 strand spirit anatomy. Working with ancestral blood codes, soul, monad, avatar, rishi, and records within. So like I said, this first round, you're dealing mostly with blood codes because that's what needs to be healed at this level. But you're starting to have awareness of soul level, monad level, your avatar, higher avatar level, and rishi, and your inner records. Alchemical themes: ascension, perfection, multiplication, and virtues. Not a sense of perfection like a perfectionist in a like shadow archetype way, but starting to learn refinement of processes. And those in spiritual power yield the Maji Codex and divine service and at one-ment. This is like a core, like kind of like an essence or a jewel that you pick up at this point. And just knowing about it isn't yielding it. You have to experience it. Virtue unlocks this. You yield spiritual power in the Maji Codex, the Grail keys. What they're all after is the Grail quest. You yield this when you're in divine service and at one-ment. So that resonance, and you can't trick this. It has to be true and authentic. So yeah,
Wow.
that's the 3, 6, 9, 12, and it's way more in depth when you go through all of them. And you'd have to read through this a bunch of times to start to kind of see what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah, but that's a good way to introduce this kind of work and give people an idea of what they would be doing. So can we just maybe wrap it up with the just about the inserts and the cap offs that you were mentioning to me the other day, and how important it is to just to kind of bring it back, I guess, full circle into the whole like why we are asking people to have shield integrity.
Okay. Well, what aspect of it exactly do you want me to talk on?
I've told people, for example, that it is important to be aware, not to be scared of things that might happen to you when you start doing pathwork, because, it's like some people are even scared. I've had people tell me, I'm not ready for that. I'm scared. I don't want, to run into entities or whatnot. And I see that happen a lot. Yes, it's important to be aware, but what type of things should be really aware of when you get into this type of work? You were saying there are inserts that block rishi cognition, for example, and stuff. Yeah.
Something that you deal with through pathwork is, yes, you can hear it, but it's also dealing with it. And this is a shift that you make to be fearless. But even then, you could still have fear casted at you and feel it, but you know that it's not yours, but it's still possible. So, and this is a war down here. We're in the trenches, you could say, at this level, and what's going on. It's not kindergarten. But a lot of people think it is, and especially in the new age, like it's all love and light. It's not. There are some extremely malevolent, intelligent networks out here, but we are powerful beings, and they know that. A lot of us have forgotten it, and a lot of people still play in the fear of embodying. If you're scared of the pathwork, honestly, you're not ready yet. And that's not like I'm going to hide this from you, but you're not ready yet, and you have to deal with that. That's just somebody's path. If you're scared of your own pathwork, then you're not ready for when you embody that. And for example, like the hero's journey, and not that everything in that's in alignment, but there will be a crisis. There will be malevolent attacks, there's going to be the enemy, you could say, the opposition. They don't want beings progressing in alignment. And when you do start to do this, there will be a pushback from the nets and the veals, and which you could perceive as an attack and mistake it as an attack, but it could be either your own shadow or some type of interaction with the environmental fields. It's not always an attack, but they do attack directly. And there is thought adjusters. They'll slip some thoughts in and try and, or like scan you and scan your thoughts and see what your traumas are and kind of try and insert some things and throw you off. Or there's, no, that's not going to work on them anymore. We're going to fucking go in and directly attack the shit out of them. There's those attacks too. And then there's groups and mages and dark magicians that will battle magic you if you start to advance through your self-initiation. So there is an aspect of all that to be prepared for. I'm not saying it's going to happen to you, but if you're activating, you're going to be breaking down their grids, webs, spells, networks, grids. And everywhere we are, we're affecting. So if you have a fully activated field, especially if you're out here indiscriminately throwing the Maharic and plasmas everywhere, blessing everything, they're going to be like, who do you think you are in our realm? That's how they think. Like they think they have authority over us because they've dominated the land and grids. So and if you're still not experiencing attacks at that point, there's something going on. A lot of people think they're doing things, but they're actually not. It's really easy for beings at certain vantage points to start throwing tags on you and manipulating and trying to utilize you. But if you can't be utilized, then you're focusing on your discernment and the foundation, and you're doing the shadow work and you're shielding and you keep doing it no matter what, you're going to start to build up a powerful stance. And that's when we need groups and assistance at certain levels, because that's what I've dealt with, is very advanced attacks. And a lot of that happened because I didn't have the physical presence of other people in alignment around me that could help me deflect it and clear it out. But this is what hub communities will be important to have, because once you start to anchor in the grids, your group and community and divine alignment, you're going to build a powerful shield, and you're going to be able to evoke eternal divine law in that environment, grids, everybody there, and form a protective space so that people can have the space to do the pathwork they need to do. So that's important. There is a risk factor. We knew this before keep coming here, and a lot of us have been stuck here, but we knew it scanning the probabilities before we kept coming into this time matrix when the falls occurred, if you weren't involved in the falls. So we knew the risk factor, but there's resolutions to things that occur, and they can't fully violate us, but they will use force, tricks, in many ways. For example, if you're contracted with them and you've made certain deals, to a certain degree, they can kind of do whatever they want to. But if you're not, and they fear you, they'll most often never admit that in any way as they're attacking, because there could be direct communication. Usually there's not. It's kind of just like unseen attacks unless you see it with your mind's eye. They will never admit that they fear you, but they do. They fear us, and that's why they're doing this to humanity, because they fear our potential and who we truly are. So it's important that we form the courage to step in to our pathwork, because the more of us that do that, the more healing we're bringing to those that will make it out of this conflict. Because not everybody will at this point. And a lot of humanity isn't even on that path. Like how you hear about like NPCs, like, and people that aren't fully there or have their soul spark. They're kind of just filling in a vessel. There's a lot of humanity that is like that. They're kind of just like running in the motion of the program, and they're not really, you could talk to them, but they're not fully like spiritually present with their consciousness. So
But they still come from source, right? So
well yeah, but when you
but
start to get into the falls, a lot has occurred, and it's been a really long time in these time cycles. You have fallen infiltrations in the tribes, and that's how there's fallen lineages incarnating into human vessels.
All right, okay.
The thing is, a lot of them are scared to incarnate in the human vessel, because that means there will be that connection point in our collective, which has the connection point to the human emotion and spirit. They might not channel it through their template, like they could be emotionless and shut off, and their chakras shut off, and they're kind of just like vampires, you could say. If you incarnate into the human vessel, there's some type of that code of regenesis. The human vessel and how the human spirit and founders race, because I would consider humans literally a founders race, not created by founders race. That's the difference between chaos and what I've resonated with. But it's extremely powerful on an emotional level, and that's just not the lower chakras. And emotion is through all our entire template, and that's our grail power. That's the gruel force, is our emotion. And the purpose of these lower levels of the human template was to go through bioregenesis. So you'd have to make, and these aren't the same things as covenant contracts, but there's some type of agreement that if I come into this vessel, I'm going to be going into bioregenesis. That's at a core archetype of our humanity, and to help consciousness rehabilitate when we weren't just stewards of elemental command. So if they come in, if they've hacked their way to and come into this through force and incarnated to then try and spread their lineage out and raid, they're violating even more. They're coming into these human vessels and trying to cause more chaos. So I'm talking about, like, for example, when you look at the royals on Earth, those aren't like fully human vessels and human spirits. It's completely different lineages. But this is outstep.
Yeah.
There are literal people through the masses that are a part of these lineages, and it's vast. So it's at a degree of so much violation on Earth that has occurred to us and Earth and the animal kingdom that it's like ridiculous. It's insane. And it's been going on for a long time. So it's important for us to step into our pathwork and alignment.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So you have this beautiful image up. I love it.
Yeah.
And is this like code that people can use for some of their pathwork too, or what would you use this code for?
Well, I mean, yeah, you could. It's the Ryushi and the blue ones, and then just like diagonal spheres, horizontal and vertical. Each sphere also is actually a Ryushi vortex. So within each sphere is a doubled and rotated.
Wow.
But you can use any eternal code with intention to kind of program the waveform with the intention into whatever you're doing. There's no like this one's for this, that one's for that. There can be, but when you're working with complex ones with just the geometry and no like light language encryption or anything, it's pretty neutral. It kind of you would pineal induct it or just have it up and program it with your intention, and then run it, put the life force in it with frequency, and then so it's a scalar imprint. This is a standing wave flash line sequence. So
yeah. So this is directly like, what you were saying about the fire codes and stuff. This is directly communicating with your DNA. This is the language your DNA.
Yeah, this along with the fire codes and fire lines is how you work with your template.
Right. Wow, so powerful. Wow, it's been amazing. Do you have anything else to add? Or you can, start wrapping it up.
I don't think so.
Awesome. I think we did a, pretty
There
good.
actually is some stuff on the word and that I didn't read, but I do have the same text in one of the Vortex math or one of the story highlights. It's the same things I was going to read.
Do you want to still read it? To include it, or you don't have to.
Kind of long, but I could read through one of the shorter ones.
Sure. Let's hear that to end the podcast. Mm-hmm.
The universal word. All is threaded within the word. Fate is not set in stone, but the destiny arc is. The word is the destiny of all. Within this is cause and effect, choice, past, present, future, and all possibilities within. Context to the overlays. It's an advanced overlay harness on your spirit anatomy, grids, planets, so forth, micro and macro correspondences. It creates transpositions within the time cycle's main organic probabilities and creates a feedback loop, artificial time matrix overlays. To break free, you have to release the seals and cap-offs and realign. And there's way more complexities and simplicities involved, but it's a harness on polarity into duality. Polarity is not duality. When you see people in New Age calling out Daisy of Death info, or so this one's talking about people saying it's dual to think there's eternal and finite.
Yeah.
When you see people in New Age calling out Daisy of Death info as creating duality in consciousness and saying to separate flower of life and lotus of life as a dual perspective and that it's all the same. This is bullshit, New Age fluff. The flower of life itself is harnessing polarity into duality. The 10 grid system harnesses through a dodecahedron, which is not the aether. It is phase-locked matter. It's not a lotus of life or 12 base lotus. For example, taking a 2D seed of life and rotating it into a 12 petaled lotus, that's not the same thing as the actual 12 pointed petaled lotus.
Right.
It's just mashing together 2D forms.
Mm-hmm.
So more info on the word. And a side remark, orlog in the word. Keep in mind, from our perspective, the word is not a web. In the teachings, they say it's the web of word. So that's why I say that. I don't consider it a web. I consider it a tapestry. I would consider webs more malevolent because of the consciousness that it comes from, which that's a whole nother talk of the types of entities and how they have formulated and what arachnids are.
Oh, wow.
Unified field and the transharmonic halls, arcs, and spaces between. It is the manifest, unmanifest of the law of one, love, the true law of one, the unified field. And in context to what I'm about to read, this isn't promoting the path of Asa True, just sharing someone's insight on this. So this isn't my writings, except at the end. Orlog, much like word, is a fundamental concept in Norse practices. It is sometimes referred to as the primal layer, due to the fact it is mentioned in lore that the Norns, these are specific beings. They say there are 3 Norns at the base of Yggdrasil, which is the world tree, which weave the web of Orlog, or a series of strands determining fate. It differs from word in that it is your moral momentum, which can be altered, but is not easy to change. It was believed that people's souls consisted of a part inherited by their parents and ancestors, which would be passed down through heritage. And a part of that was influenced and created through the person's own actions throughout one's lifetime. This is different from the concept of karma, in that there isn't necessarily the idea of good and bad. It states that the things you tend to do will tend to happen to you regardless. For example, if you tend to be honorable, you will generally find yourself surrounded by honorable people who treat you honorably. Part of Orlog is inherited, is believed to have been passed down through your ancestors. The majority of this part would come from your parents, a lesser amount from your grandparents, and a lesser amount from your great-grandparents, and so on all the way through your heritage. This part of Orlog would also be passed down from you to your children. In a way, part of our Orlog is not up to our making. It has already been made and is given to us, but we are still responsible for the actions we take in responding to them. Picture a web or a tapestry. Word is the general web or tapestry laid out representing our fate. Orlog would be the threads and layers of threads making this web possible. Everything is interconnected in this way, making both Orlog and word essential to each other. This concept of a part of you being inherited stresses the importance of family and these types of beliefs and practices, as well as makes the consequences of your actions in Orlog more apparent. Doing something which is undesirable or bad will affect the rest of your family in a negative way. The part of Orlog that is determined by you is built up through the actions and behaviors you have shown throughout your life, and is a type of moral momentum. Changing this moral momentum is not an easy thing to accomplish. You cannot get rid of past wrongs by attempting to atone for them. They are still there regardless. So I'd say in this, you technically could, through divine right action and atone at one-ment, being in resonance, collapse certain probabilities, past, present, and future. But it's both. It'll still exist there in the records, but you're kind of like discharging it and encrypting your original core intention into it. So this could get into trauma healing also. You still experienced it, it's in the records, but you can collapse those probabilities that were manifesting, and so essentially transmute those threads of the Orlog.
Yeah.
However, sufficient atonement and actions that are considered right could equal out the balance, and through the wrongs would still be there, the right would make it even once again. The issue is that good, bad, and right, wrong are hard to determine in Norse practices. There isn't a giant list of things you do that are considered bad or good. It's decided through your actions. What determines good, bad, right, wrong are behaviors and actions that make you a leader, companion, kinsman, partner, or just someone desirable to others. In Asatru, this goes so far as to say you strive to be desirable to the gods. This is how the Norse determined ethical systems. All these things are considered: the effect on family, the effect on social desirability, one's own morals, the gods' opinions, etc. Norse see the correct and right actions to make us desirable in general. And as you can imagine, this leaves plenty of room for flexibility. The Norse understand that there are situational occurrences which call for certain action that may be against the virtues and behavioral ethics they strive to uphold. Situations can change the perspective of things. Taking unfavorable actions on behalf of those to whom you have professed loyalty to builds an Orlog that is filled with a likelihood that they will similarly defend you if called on to do so. So I don't know if I fully agree with that. In the context they're saying, it depends how you're looking at it, but it's basically saying, like, even if you don't agree fully with what's going on, you're loyal to them, so you're going to defend them. But it depends how you're looking at this. It could just be like you're defending your kin, your cloister, and there's loyalty, and what's building up in that is an orlog that they will help you when you help them. But they're talking about situational occurrences. So back then, like, or your kin's going to war and it's not your war, but you're loyal to them. So go to war and help them defend. And they'll defend you. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah. Okay.
there is a certain type of reward or punishment one can receive because there is no forgiveness under these concepts. One would have to strive to atone and make up for the past wrongs by balancing them out with right actions. Depending on your orlog, you may go to one of the various halls or have the halls close to you. However, most tend to not think too much about the afterlife. The here and now is thought to be the more important aspect, and whatever comes will come. All right. Well, yeah, this one's important too.
Okay.
Fate is something that we, and again, I'm not promoting these paths. I don't follow them. It's just sharing somebody's information on this. Fate is something that we as Heidnir, I think is pronounced, are very concerned with, and for good reason. It is the understanding, not the belief, that all things are subject to natural law. Nothing happens without reason or by random chance. Many tribes, kindreds, etc., call the process of natural law word. However, the word weird, it's actually weird, like the word weird, but it's word through correct, and its meaning is incorrect when used in the context of hedonate. The word weird actually comes from Old English. It is derived from the common Germanic term word is, and has cognates, a word that has a common etymological origin. An Old Saxon word, Old High German wort, or Old Norse urder. The Proto-Indo-European root is wort, to turn or rotate. Otherwise, worth, in common Germanic, to come to pass, to become, to be due. And they go into a bunch more. I don't know all the pronunciations. The notion of worth in both material gains and in concepts of honor. The translation given in a concise dictionary of Old Icelandic is simply Urdur, word fate. When looking up Urdu in an introduction to Old Norse, we are redirected to Verda. Verda means to happen, come to pass. According to both a concise dictionary of Old Icelandic, also means becomes, be, as above there's a relationship to worth. This can be found in Old Norse as well, as verd means worth, price, according to both. So word order, the order of creation, the ordinance. All right, so I refined it. Word is the tapestry and orlog is the threads. This is why they fear those that wield elemental command and codex and are in alignment, because you can speak the word, the weird. This is what I was talking about. If you're being, actually, I explained this down, but if you're being extremely violated and your core intention, your stance, your alignment, your pathwork, your way of living is virtuous, you can speak the word, the law of creation, which is natural. This is why they can't even fully violate us and just take us all over. They have to trick us. And that's what this birth certificate system, the straw man, all of that is. It's a heist. They're trying to trick us. They're using things that are technically already null and void contracting to try and contract us into a huge trick to give ourselves up to these networks, because they can't fully violate creation. They need our choice, but they will pressure the shit out of us, and some of us they will attack the shit out of and try and pressure you to give in. So you can call forth, unless they block you and attack you, but if you are fully in access with your life force, you can call it forth, and you're not casting, but you're evoking eternal creation to respond to what's occurring, and their orlog will accelerate. So everything that's coming back to them. And if they keep deflecting it and casting it on others that they have in their webs, it'll just get worse for them eventually. And that's what's happening. It's going to blow back on them so hard that many of these networks are going to be completely obliterated, you could say, with what they're doing. It's just how it's going to happen. And it has before, not fully, but like the Phantom Matrix hasn't just imploded and gone into space to us, but they make it worse for themselves, but they have ways of prolonging their returns and what's happening.
Right.
Through chaos magic and order out of chaos. But when you are in alignment, because you can speak the word, the weird, which is above or log, the ancient law, or light law. So in a sense, you're connecting with that scalar field that I showed, and you're aligning with the convergence, the word. And you could even kind of look at this as the word, like the sound word, like the sound tones, the pre-manifest sound, and then the sound manifesting the light. You're connecting in alignment with elemental command and the seed sound tonals of creation, which it's getting pretty long, but I also didn't get a chance to show that either.
Oh, but you can show it if you want. Go ahead.
But Orlog is fate, probabilities. Word connects to destiny. The heroic probability is the word, and within is the Orlog. Cause and effect correspondences. As you speak, act, so it shall be. You write your law, but nothing is above eternal law, macro. So it's unchanging the more you act a certain way, but it can be changed. What's truly unchanging is the destiny arc unless one chooses fall. Then are all the games and loopholes they do. And if our group's in alignment and something acts out at you in violation, you can speak forth the word, weird, and accelerate Orlog, calling on returns, return to rightful owner and law of threefold return. Out of or from, or the sound tonal meaning out of or from, and log meaning law. Word, order, natural law, the eternal law. Word is the tapestry and Orlog is the threads, is levels of word, macro, and the core destiny, the core destiny, core purpose at a universal level and deeper, the core vision and mission of a spirit, then the micro tapestries threaded through the time cycles in every life incarnation, and all the threads are the Orlog, which can be unthreaded and threaded again. And this is a part of the overall word, which is made by our choices and in correspondence to laws. But then is the eternal word of all, and levels of that connecting with the individual. Word is the space where the law is applied. The Orlog is the law being choices, etc.
Okay.
You can connect this in with Akashic records and karma. It's kind of like the same thing, how it's deeper, but Akashic level, it's kind of like the tapestry. It's like a library holding all the information, and the karma is like the law within it and your cause and effect. It's kind of the same thing, just from a North perspective.
Okay.
There's so much more to all this. Like even that is just a base intro to all of this.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure this information will reach whoever's meant to listen to it, and I'm sure people that are really interested will hear the entire video.
Yeah.
Did you say you wanted one more image, or do you want to just wrap it up?
I could show it briefly if I can find it, but
yeah, take your time.
So back in the beginning, how I had the crystal and a tonals. These are like the seed sound tonals, and you can find this still in each one of those tonals in the Sanskrit sound tonals.
Okay.
They're still present. There's many seed tonals. All right, so in Sanskrit, the word Krista means the all attractor, the cosmic attractor, and Krista, Krista. But there's a strong link with the word crystal. And two crystal, like the 7 letters, and 2 more tonals, a. So I say not 7, but 9 sacred tonals of creation, lost wisdom of the rishis, brought into many other languages and changed, also means anointed, Christos in Greek, and Sanskrit also spoken cursed, and now used and brought into worship of Krishna or Krishna. To point something out with that, I'm not saying that Krishna is in alignment. A lot of people don't agree with that and either say it's not about his image as a blue being, but Krishna is like the divine personality, Godhead of the Godhead, creator, source, creator, essence, a manifested impersonal personality directly from source. I understand that. So I've had people message me and like, no, don't you understand that it's like this? And I get it. I've seen the full perspective and what they share on Krishna and the whole thing. I understand it. But I don't align with that blue being image being what is said. I don't think you can put that into an image. And it's when you look into all the stories, and I know it's not fully about the stories, but it's a trickster being. And
yeah, you have this in your highlights too, don't you?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. Each of these seed tonals has a deeper etymology meaning in the language and through mantra scribes of the rishis. So for Ka, to love, light, spirit; Ra, fire, strength, one; Ya, joining or attaining; Sa, wise, noble, presence, totality; Ta, life, creativity, manifest; Ha, supreme empowerment, breath; La, power of bliss; and A, in the Sanskrit, it's an A with a line over it, so AI in pronunciation, long A, and Ah, the non-conceptualization of unborn existence. So yeah, our core seed sound tonals, and there could actually be 12, but I don't know the other ones. I haven't brought any insight on that through. There could be an aspect of this that even like the like ka, ra, ya, it could even possibly go into like all the vowels, like ki, ri, yi,
That's an interesting.
ro. Like it could do that also. There could be so many different sound tones from these core ones.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Maybe. That's a very interesting perspective. Wow. So let me know if you want to share anything else that we want to include in this video for people to see or hear. Any last messages or
Well, there's all types of things to talk on. I haven't even gotten into health and herbs and detox and that included in pathwork, just mechanical and the pathwork type, but there's a whole level of pathwork involved with that also, and navigating all of the new world order agenda and agenda 2030, all of the transhumanist stuff. So yeah, there's a lot that we could talk on, but
for sure
we didn't get into. But
no, but we can do that next time for sure. We should have like maybe a few more episodes focused on different ones we can expand on, not do maybe a 2-hour one, but this was amazing. I think this is perfect. The way it is, like I said, people that are really resonating with this information will watch the whole thing, even if it's in parts. I'll see you guys again for another podcast episode next week, but thank you so much for sharing all of this, Jay, for your time.
thank you.